Obviously, we know local governments, state and local governments, they are in huge trouble. They're always telling us they're not sure how they're going to pay their pension obligations. And virtually all are asking, begging, demanding the federal government to step up with more money for things like education. And of course, New York City at the top of this list. Nevertheless, take a look at that, guys. New York City shelling out $87 million to restore the facade of a housing project building. They want to make the housing projects look better. Wouldn't it be better if they actually spent this money on education? Joining us now, Peter Morici is an economist and professor at the University of Maryland, and back with us is Don Peebles. I'll start with you, Peter. I mean, with this pension time bomb, I don't think people understand how really threatening it is, and it seems unresolved.
Well, the pension time bomb is real. It's pronounced, especially in places like Illinois, Detroit, even Maryland, where I teach. But the bottom line is that governments don't do good capital budgeting, whether it's housing projects, pensions, or public schools. They don't maintain buildings properly, and they don't plan for the future properly. Instead, they spend every last nickel they've got creating jobs and constituents and buying votes and welfare and so forth. You know, with housing, they shouldn't be in that business at all. They should leave it to the private sector. The problem is the zoning laws are so restrictive, the private sector can't build housing for low-income people. Well,
Don Peebles happens to be one of the best in the business and in New York City. Would you agree with that you could do this a lot better than New York? Would it take you $87 million to make to redo the facade of a housing project?
Well, no. In fact, in the private sector, the building would never get to a point where the facades are in such poor condition that they would need that kind of capital improvement. It'd be done on a gradual basis. But clearly, one of the biggest challenges, the number one challenge to the cost of affordable housing and low-income housing in New York City is not zoning. It's the cost of construction. In fact, there's a requirement that you use union labor to build affordable and low-income housing. Where you want your dollars to stretch the most, you have to spend the most. And union labor and union construction is 30% more. And that's more valid for luxury construction, but not affordable and low income.
So in a way, I mean, you're agreeing with Peter in the sense that the regulatory environment, New York City in particular, this incestuous relationship between the Democrats and party and unions, it's costing all of us then, ultimately, because if you're building $87 million facades, the taxpayers got to pay for that.
Yeah, and the reality is, unfortunately, you don't have people with great business experience running these governments, and so consequently, they make these bad mistakes and they pass it on to the next office holder or the next administration, where these dollars need to be spent on a regular basis, and the private sector should do that. The private sector should be in the business of providing housing, not the public sector.
Peter, I mean, I think the people in that housing projects would prefer if there was $87 million spent on computers for their children to learn maybe how to code so they can get the hell out of the housing projects. I mean, this kind of thing just blows my mind.
Well, absolutely. The problem is, you know, building regulations that are there for the unions, not for the people that live in them. But with regard to the schools, New York City spends huge amounts of money on the schools, and the real problem is management and bureaucracy. I mean, they spend more time shuffling paper, moving paper, meeting regulations, writing regulations, and complying with them. And that money could be so much better spent by just putting a computer in the hands of the kids and guiding them through the internet so they can teach themselves.
Yeah, and don't forget about those expensive rubber rooms, right, for the kids.
Right, exactly. But there's all kinds of stuff like that that makes no sense in the public schools. That's why my wife retired at 55. She just couldn't take it anymore.
All right, guys, thanks a lot. You both are absolutely fantastic.